This yin yoga sequence is being recorded during the hot, humid summer months. And so it has the intention and theme of cooling and expansion. So most of the postures will take on a more restorative aspect as we try to expand the body and allow it to rest and to kind of dump heat, if you will. Postures will include Prone Savasana, legs up the wall, banana pose, reclined butterfly, and 5-pointed star pose here. So props that will be very useful: a few blankets, a few pillows, books, maybe yoga blocks if you have them, and if you have a yoga sandbag or a yoga bolster, those might actually even serve you better. The topics discussed during the practice will be what can be seen in the southern sky from northern latitudes in the deep summertime, late July, early August, which is basically the constellation Scorpio. And in the center, at its heart, is the star Antares. So the practice will start by getting centered, and I will invite you to sit back on your heels, like so. And if this is not possible, i.e. it creates pain and injury, then go ahead and invite yourself to another comfortable seat. If you're close, if you're wanting to do this and you just can't quite get down on your heels, then take some books or take a yoga block. Sit in between your heel on yoga block that's a height that you can actually comfortably sit on here. And then allow yourself to get settled. Allow yourself into practice. So this is where you start giving yourself permission and power to actually be here right now. So you notice the things that are going around you. You notice the air temperature. You notice the contact points between your body and the floor, however you're sitting. You maybe notice your torso if it's kind of kinked, and then unkink it by lengthening it out here. Maybe shrug your shoulders up towards your ears, roll them back to open up the front of your torso so that you can breathe better. And then notice your breath. So your breath is this cycling that's happening in the present moment. That gets you in touch with the here and now. And then soften the tension in your face. So release your jaw, soften your eye sockets. Let tension and stress melt away and just allow yourself to exist and to be here right now. Hands are soft, shoulders are soft. Continue to watch your breath and allow your breath to slow your mind down. And you can do that by maybe slowing your breath. So it's a push-pull system. As your mind slows your breath down, your breath slows your mind down. So as you increase the duration of each inhale and each exhale, everything might begin to quiet for you. It might not. Thoughts might be racing, and that's okay. Just notice whatever your thoughts are up to, whatever your emotions are up to. This is the time to just notice. This is the space to notice them. And then continue to breathe. The theme for class is a cooling class here. And there's some types of breath work that you can do that are cooling breath. Most of them are heating breath. Most of them are yang breath. There's not many cooling breaths in yoga. This is one of them. This is called the cooling breath that I'll demonstrate, and you can try it if you wish. We'll start out just trying to deepen the breath here. And the idea is we're trying to feel like it's cooling, it's kind of cooling the tongue. I sometimes just call it swamp cooler breath. I lived in an area where swamp coolers effectively cooled things off here. Then they don't work too well where I live right now, but if the humidity is really low, then they work really well, and this has the same effect. So this swamp cooling breath works like this. you basically stick your tongue out slightly out of your mouth. And if you can roll your tongue, then roll it. Some of us can't roll our tongue, so if you can't roll your tongue, don't worry about it. And then you kind of make an O shape with your mouth. So it kind of looks like this. Or maybe your tongue is flat if you can't roll your tongue. When you inhale, inhale through your mouth when you make that face. So your tongue is slightly sticking out and you're making an O face, and then inhale. And see if you can feel the air rushing across your tongue. It picks up moisture and that creates a slight cooling sensation in your mouth. And then when you exhale, close your mouth and just exhale out your nose if your nose is clear. So a cycle would be on the inhale, open your mouth, roll your tongue if you can. Exhale through the nose. And the idea is to notice the cooling effect as you're bringing air into the mouth on the inhale. And then exhale. So I'll do a couple more rounds of this. You can try this. If it's not working for you, just go back to normal breathing here. So on the inhale, the air comes through the mouth so it can get that cooling feeling running across the tongue. And then you exhale the old air just out of your nose. Maybe one more cycle here. And then exhale. If you were trying to do that, you can continue that for a couple more breaths or just come back to a normal natural breath here for a few more cycles. We'll do a little bit of a warm-up twist before we get into the first long-held yin posture. So at some point, raise your arms up above your torso, interlace your fingers, and then turn your palms to face up towards the ceiling, and then really grow tall here. So stretch your arms up as far as they will go. Reach up through your torso. Press your palms up towards the ceiling until nothing goes anymore here. And then release your fingers. Draw your arms down to shoulder height. Extend it out to each side. And then begin to twist to the right, just as far as you go. And slowly lower your arms. So maybe the left arm kind of rests on your right thigh, right hand behind your torso. Spend a few breaths here. So inhale to create space in your torso. Exhale and release. Your head and neck can be neutral if they need to be. But if it's okay with your neck, maybe you gaze over that back shoulder. And then gently bring yourself back to center. Arms come up overhead. Interlace your fingers and extend your arms up again towards the ceiling. Grow long here. And then release your hands. Extend your arms down to shoulder height and gently twist over to the other side, to the left this time. And just a couple of breaths here. This is just a warm-up twist. So it's not the twist to end all twists. It's meant to be gentle, just to your stopping point here. One more breath here. Bring yourself back to center, maybe a little bit of a counter twist here. And then we'll get set up now for the first yin posture. This first yin posture is known as Prone Savasana, and it requires a little bit of height underneath your torso. So instead of lying on our backs, as the description of the posture is the prone posture, we're lying on our bellies. And indeed, we maybe need some height and something with softness to put under your belly. If you have a yoga bolster, that might be a good thing to do this posture with. But if you don't, grab some pillows. You can use a couple, you can use 4, you can use 6. However many pillows you have, the firmer they are, the better they work. Line the pillows up along the way you're going to lay on them. And the way Prone Savasana works is you lay on the bolster with your head and your neck, chin and neck just off the end of the pillows or the bolster here, so that your head kind of just rests on the floor. And then the idea is to relax your legs and feet, let them kind of spread out. Relax your arms, maybe your arms are kind of just relaxed forward here. And so notice you're all kind of just sprawled out on the floor. This is to create space in the body. And you can visualize releasing heat in the body, letting it just evaporate from the backside of your body. This is a cooling sequence. This is a slight neutral, almost forward fold posture here. And your head can just rest on the floor. It can turn to one side. We'll stay here for a few minutes. So this is the first posture. So find kind of a spread out posture here that creates a little bit of comfort. This is a little bit more of a restorative sequence, so there doesn't have to be any intensity in this at all. It's just meant to create the shape. Something allows you to radiate heat, if you will, so that you can cool off. Maybe you want to do this with fan on in the room, so the fan can just blow off the body heat that's being generated by the backside of the body here. But I will go ahead and explain the 3 principles of a yin practice. So the first principle is called finding your edge, since this is a more restorative practice in its nature. Your edge is basically a place where you're taking the shape of the posture. It's well supported so that you feel comfortable and stable, but you're not feeling a lot of intensity here. You're not trying to go for something that's really uncomfortable. You're actually kind of almost going for comfort. So your edge takes on a different intent, a different emphasis in a more restorative practice here. So if there is anything that's painful or really, really uncomfortable, then I would say you definitely want to modify or find a different version of the shape that you're making here. Or maybe get some more props, more blankets or pillows here to accommodate what you need. Second principle is called stillness. This really works for a cooling practice here. So create some peace, some stillness. Give yourself permission to stay for a while. It is the intent and the purpose of practice. To have nowhere to go, to just hang out, if you will, in the postures here. That doesn't make sense to us busy Westerners that always have to be doing something. Believe it or not, you get some pretty amazing physical and mental benefits from allowing yourself to have patience and to stay. And then finally, it's the time that's spent in these postures that really help release the muscle tonus. It helps get into these subtle connective tissues by spreading out like we're spreading out here in this Prone Savasana pose here. So maybe another half a minute here in this posture. Maybe another 5 long, slow breaths here. And just allow yourself to sink and to feel in this posture. By the way, if your head and your neck are getting really uncomfortable here, in whatever position they're in, give yourself permission to change the orientation of your head and your neck here to find something a little bit more accessible and comfortable. Maybe just one more breath here. And then when you're ready, you can bring yourself out. Be slow about this. There's no need to hurry here. So slowly bring yourself up and out of this pose here. Maybe notice if there's some rebound from doing that here. And then maybe clear your mat of props. But the next yin posture will be legs up the wall pose. So what I have done is, you'll need some wall space for this. So if you don't have any wall space, maybe find some blank wall space. You can have absolutely no props for legs up the wall, or you can have a bolster or some books underneath your hips. I'm using a single blanket here that I'm going to have under my hips. And then from here, sit sideways against the wall that you're going to go into legs up the wall. So the hardest part about legs up the wall is getting into legs up the wall here. So as I lower my torso, I kind of rotate my legs up the wall. And sometimes this takes 1 or 2 tries. Once I get there, I kind of situate my sacrum, my low back on the blanket, and then kind of straighten my legs out here. And then you can wiggle your feet around, maybe find a nice position for your legs. Arms are comfortably extended on either side. Head and neck are comfortable. And if you're finding your head and neck a little bit too uncomfortable, if you have the pillows and the blankets around, you can take the pillows. If you're too cold, you can always wrap yourself in a blanket, but the point to this sequence is a cooling sequence. So the assumption is you're too hot and you're trying to cool off, so probably covering up with a blanket. It's not really the intent here. We're trying to stay open and expansive in these postures so that the body heat can kind of move, has a chance to kind of move away here. So a few minutes. And legs up the wall here. Maybe we'll go for a little bit more time. So we'll maybe stay here for about 4 minutes here. And legs up the wall. So make sure everything is feeling nice and comfortable and supported. Maybe you need more height underneath your hips. Maybe you need less. So the work that's often done in these restorative postures is finding the right set of props, the right setup to actually make this feel restorative. And so if you're sitting here in desperation and agony, I can tell you that that's not restorative, that's something else is going on, something needs to change. So notice if you're feeling that here. And then if you are feeling comfortable, then this is where you give yourself permission for stillness. So at the time of this recording, which is in very late July in the year 2020, late July, early August, in the southern sky of the northern hemisphere, there's some very bright and characteristic objects that I thought I'd point out. Right now, there's 2 planets. There's 2 planets deep in the southeast to the south, 2 very bright planets, Jupiter and Saturn. They're in the constellation Sagittarius. Now Sagittarius has an asterism in it called the teapot, and Jupiter and Saturn are to the left of the teapot. So if you go out in the evening, again, this is in the northern hemisphere at mid-latitudes, look in the south, you'll see these two very bright objects. Well, you'll see Jupiter. Jupiter is really bright, and then a fairly bright object next to it, which is Saturn. And if it's dark enough, you might be able to see the teapot asterism that's to the right of these 2 objects, very low in the southern sky. So the reason why I mentioned the date of this recording is because planets move with respect to the stars. So if you watch this video a few years from now, Jupiter and Saturn definitely won't be there anymore, but they're there now, and they're wonderful objects to spot if you happen to be outside, say around anywhere from about 9:30 to 11:30 at night, should be roughly in the southern part of the sky. And Jupiter is the brightest object in the sky, so you can see it there. Jupiter and Saturn, the 2 giant gas balls of our solar system. So the 2 largest planets, much, much larger than Earth. They're both these giant fluffy gas balls of hydrogen and helium. Jupiter a little bit closer to the Earth, Saturn much farther away, but both of them not very close. They're bright because they're huge planets. Jupiter's 480 million miles from the sun. The Earth is 93 million miles by comparison. Because Jupiter's so far away, it takes 12 years for Jupiter to make it all the way around the sun. So that's 1 year. 1 Jupiter year is 12 Earth years. Saturn even much farther away, so it's over 900 million miles away. And because of that, Saturn takes nearly 30 years to make one orbit around the sun. That means if you're 30 years old, then in Saturn years, you're 1 year old here. And so I just thought I'd mention those planets. By the way, Pluto is actually right in between Jupiter and Saturn at the moment. You can't see Pluto unless you have a professional grade telescope, because Pluto's 13 magnitude. And the ancients certainly didn't know about Pluto. It's a modern object, this small icy dwarf planet on the very, very edge of the inner solar system. So maybe just one more breath here, and legs up the wall. You can start to move finger and toes. We're coming out of this posture. When you're ready, gently bend your knees and place your feet on the wall here. You can maybe push yourself away from the wall if that's possible, and then very slowly and gently roll yourself over to one side. When you get there, stay there for a breath or two before you jump up out of the pose. So allow yourself to notice how you're feeling after you've been inverted here for a little over 4 minutes. And then when you're feeling ready, you can slowly bring yourself up. And then when you bring yourself up, a little bit of just wiggling around if you need to work out the kinks here. We're moving into our next yin posture, next long-held posture, the first side of a two-sided pose known as banana pose. So what you can do is you'll make your way onto your back, extend your legs out long. And then banana is just like it sounds. You're going to make the shape of a banana here. I may be dressed quite appropriately for this, so I guess I got some black bad spots in my banana pose here. So lengthen out through the legs and then start inching both legs over to the right side as far as they go until they're stuck. You're trying to keep this left hip on the ground, so hips need to stay flat so that you lengthen out. We're expanding out through the left side. So this is with the theme of expansion here. Kind of inch your torso over to the left, over to the right, excuse me. So same direction as the feet, so that you make this banana shape here, or what I like to call the crescent moon shape. And then decide what other modifications you want to do with this posture. You can cross your heels, you can extend your arms overhead here. Now, you can increase the intensity of this posture by putting some weight on this left hip to try to keep it down. Since my intention for practice is more of an expanding to cool, I'm going to skip the weight or the sandbag on the hip. But if you like that, you can always go get a weight, place a weight on the hip just to keep it down so that more of the traction goes into this left side. And then from here, you'll soften and settle. And just find a place where you're in the shape, but it's not very intense. You just need to stay for time. It's the intensity is having the patience to be still for a few minutes. So we'll stay here for a couple more minutes in this side of banana pose. So in the southeastern sky, you can spot Jupiter, you can spot Saturn right next to it. To the right of the planets, to the right of Sagittarius, to the right of the center of the galaxy, which lies in the direction of Sagittarius, is another well-known constellation of stars that's very characteristic and equally recognizable. So if you're trying to learn about the stars and navigate around the night sky, this constellation, one of the zodiac constellations, it's the constellation Scorpius. And it's one of the few constellations that sort of actually looks like what it actually is. You can actually trace out a pattern of stars that actually looks like the body of a scorpion. And so, wonderful. And most of the stars are pretty bright in it. So it's bright and it's characteristically shaped. And so it's a good constellation to get to know so that you can go off and look at fainter constellations. By the way, there's a really faint zodiac constellation known as Libra, the balance or the scales. It's right next to Scorpio. Unfortunately, it's one of the dimmest constellations in the zodiac. So if you're a Libra and you're looking for your constellation, you look for Scorpius first, and when you find Scorpius, then you look over and you find Libra here. Scorpius is characterized by its brightest star, which is what I would like to talk a little bit about here. So maybe another 5 long breaths on this side of banana pose. And then we'll consider the brightest star in Scorpius, and the brightest star is called Antares. Antares is a red supergiant that you can tell looks orangish in color. In fact, sometimes it's about the same brightness as Mars, and because it's near the ecliptic, Mars sometimes passes very close to it. And since it's orange in color, and since Mars is orange in color, the ancients wanted to make sure they didn't confuse the two. And so that's where names come from. Antares basically means not Mars, so you don't confuse it with Mars here. That's actually its name, but it's also known, probably more popularly known as the heart of the scorpion, because it's in the exact middle of the body of the curvy scorpion shape that it makes. So just maybe 3 more breaths here. When you're ready, you slowly release everything, bring yourself back to your center line. When you get there, you can just allow yourself to kind of recover from that side of banana pose if you want to. You can gently bend both knees, draw your knees into your torso, give your knees a nice hug. You can rock from side to side. And then from here, lengthen yourself back out. And we'll try the other side of banana pose here. So nice long neutral body here, and then bring your extended legs over to the other side. Walk your heels as far as they go until they feel stuck. They don't go anymore. And then you'll inch your torso over to the same side, trying to keep your pelvic bone, your hips level here. So again, maybe you need a weight here on this right hip. But if you can keep it close to the ground, then you don't need a weight. And you can just expand through this whole right side here. So feeling just a very light, gentle traction here, but you just open up here. Arms can be down by your sides. They can be extended up overhead. You can lengthen out through this right arm if it feels okay here. You can experiment with crossing the feet on this side. So in other words, this is all part of finding your particular banana pose here. And then stay here for a few minutes on this side. So Antares is one of the brightest stars in the night sky. So once you spot Jupiter and Saturn in the summer times, low in the south, whether those planets are there or not, there will always be this bright star of Antares. I always like to say this is an oversimplification, but stars are usually bright because they're big or because they're close. Antares is bright because it's big. Antares is this old red supergiant that's about 550 light years from the Earth, so not very close. It's kind of in our general neighborhood of the Milky Way, but it's not like it's just a few light years away. It's pretty far away. It's huge. It's in the old stage of the red giant branch, and it's a big star, so it's much more massive than the sun. It's about 12 times more massive. This is the weight or the mass of the star. But its volume is even far greater than that. So the volume of Antares is about 700 times the diameter of our own sun. What that means is if we could magically stick the center of Antares, the same place the center of our sun is located, then that means Antares would extend out beyond the orbit of Mars. So it's volume-wise, it's gigantic compared to the sun. There's an analogous star to Antares in the wintertime, and that's the star Betelgeuse. So if you're familiar with the constellation Orion in the winter, one of the shoulder stars in Orion is one of these bright old supergiant stars that's very famous too, called Betelgeuse. And Antares, very similar to Betelgeuse, are about the same distance away. They're about the same age in the same supergiant phase, about the same mass, and they both have this characteristic orangish color to them. Except Betelgeuse is a star that you see in the wintertime from northern latitudes. Antares you see in the summertime. Actually, the constellation Scorpio itself, all those stars are deep in the southern celestial hemisphere, so they're actually known as southern stars. From the southern hemisphere, you can see Scorpio and Antares almost directly overhead. They're that prominent. But for us northerners, we see Antares as this bright orangish star low in the sky. And it's this amazing, beautiful star of huge size. When Antares actually ends its life, it will actually end it in a huge supernova explosion, much similar to what Betelgeuse will do when it ends its life. And it'll grow so bright that it'll be as bright as the full moon, and it'll be quite a show. Antares will go supernova anywhere between tomorrow and 100,000 years from now. We don't really know, but that's where it is in its life cycle here. One more breath on the side of banana pose, and then gently bring yourself back to center. When you get back to center, a little bit of wiggling around it is in order, or if you want to, you can just hug your knees again and rock gently from side to side. At some point, roll over to one side, bring yourself up to seated. And the next posture is a supported bridge pose that I have named Milky Way Pose, because on a very clear night, you'll notice, particularly now, that the Milky Way passes right through Sagittarius. So the Milky Way is right in between the star Antares and the bright planets of Jupiter and Saturn here. This is where we'll need a prop. So you'll either need a pile of books or a yoga block if you have them. I'm going to use books today, so I've got myself a nice pile of books. I have many of them, so I can choose the height that I want. Maybe I don't want to go so high in the supported bridge pose, so I use fewer books. Maybe I'd like a lot of height here. So, got the books at the ready. You'll lay on your back. Bend your knees, put your feet on the floor, because you're going to raise your hips up. And as you raise your hips up, you're going to put your props, your height, underneath your low back. So this goes underneath your sacrum, the back of your pelvic bone. So it's a little bit higher than your glutes, but it's a little bit lower than your lumbar spine, the bendy part of your spine. It's kind of right in between the two, because this is the flat, stable place. The whole point of this explanation is it's the most comfortable and stable feeling spot to rest your body on the books here. And then from here, you can keep your knees bent if that's more comfortable for you, or you can experiment with lengthening your legs out. Once they're lengthened out, let them relax, and if they roll in or they roll out, that's fine. And then arms alongside your torso, maybe pretty far away. So again, we're practicing this theme of expansion. And obviously this pose is is an example of that, in that we're expanding the whole front line of the body here. Notice how this is feeling. If this is too dramatic, take some height away from underneath your torso. If it's not dramatic enough, if you would like to feel a little bit of the opening of this posture, add some books so you can create your own height here. So this is the posture. This is where we'll stay for a few minutes here. I call this Milky Way because if you do get a completely clear night, you can notice how the Milky Way makes a graceful arc from one horizon to the other horizon here. Soften and settle. Find your breath. Remind yourself of your intention. If your intention is to cool, think cool thoughts here. Think of yourself just slowly, fully sublimating like a comet here. Comet made of cool ices. So even though we know Antares as this very famous red supergiant star, the actual stellar system is made up of two stars. This red supergiant actually has a companion. You can't really see it unless you have a telescope, but if you do have a pretty good telescope, you can actually separate the two and actually see its much smaller and dimmer companion, which, by the way, happens to be a pretty bright main sequence blue star in its own right. It's actually really hot, so the outer layers of Antares, very low temperature for a star. That's why we see it as kind of a yellowish, orangish, reddish color. But its companion is a normal main sequence star like our sun, but with a very high surface temperature, which makes it appear blue-white. They have a surface temperature of almost 22,000 Celsius here. So very, very hot. And if you could see it, it has a very different color than its larger companion Antares. Turns out this little star is actually still much more massive than the sun. It's about 5 times the mass of the sun. And so eventually when it grows old, it too will go supernova. Now stars in general eat up their fuel much faster when they're massive. So even though Antares is an old red supergiant, it's actually only about 15 million years old. Maybe that sounds like a long time, but it's not a long time in the life of the stars. Our sun itself is over 5 billion years old and is only about halfway through its life, so it has another 5 billion years to go. So 15 million years, not very long, but the more massive a star is, the much faster it burns through its fuel. Thank goodness our sun, small star, and so it goes through its nuclear fuel very slowly here. We'll maybe stay here if you're okay in this pose for another minute. If you're not, always give yourself permission to come out. The point, this is definitely not a competition, this kind of a practice. So the competition might be is the patience you need to acquire to stay in these poses. So maybe a few more breaths in this posture. Getting back to the constellation that Antares is in, very famous constellation Scorpio, the Scorpion. It was seen as a scorpion throughout much of the classical history of human civilization, even though there's evidence that it was seen as a scorpion clear back in pre-Babylonian times here. The Egyptians saw the constellation as a scorpion, and it was dedicated to the scorpion goddess. The Polynesians didn't see it as a scorpion, though. They saw a fishhook, And they believed it was the fishhook that their demigod Maui used to pull up the islands, particularly the Hawaiian Islands and in the Pacific Ocean. So instead of a scorpion, that big long trail of stars was a fishhook to them. Just one more breath here. And then when you're ready to come out of this pose, do so slowly. First, bend your knees, put your feet back down onto the ground. When you're ready, push up through your shoulders and your feet to raise your hips up so you can remove your props, books or blocks. Gently lower your hips back down to the ground. Take the books off to the side here. Maybe spend some time just to reverberate here. This can be a subtly intense posture here. So we can try, as a counter pose, we can try reclined windshield wipers here. So move your feet away from each other. So maybe they find each end of the mat if you're using a mat here. And then lower both knees over to one side. When they get there, take the inner foot, place it on the outside of the inner thigh. Maybe stay here for a couple of breaths. At some point, release, bring your knees back up. Go over to the other side, so they lower over to the opposite side. If you want a little bit more traction on that inner hip socket, you take your inner foot, place it on the inner thigh, let it rest there for another breath or so. Release the foot back down to the ground, bring your knees back up to center. You can kind of move them back and forth if you wish. You can even kind of gently hug your knees into your torso. And then roll over to one side, bring yourself up. We'll move into the next posture, which is Reclined Butterfly Pose here. Now, we've already done a back bend, but if you would like another back bend, you'll need some props for this. Otherwise, if you don't want another back bend, you can just go without props. So to create a tiny little back bend in your back, you'll come to seated. Maybe pile some pillows up behind your hips and move them, scooch them up so that they're next here. Make butterfly legs, so bend both knees, lower them out to either side. Bring the bottoms of your feet together. In this restorative version, the heels don't have to be close. They can be however close they are that's comfortable. You can keep your heels fairly far and make kind of a diamond shape with your thighs and your shins here. And then just lower yourself back onto the pillows here. So notice this is another expansive posture. Arms are out wide, shoulders droop over the props, over the pillows. However, maybe you want to maintain a bit of a neutral spine in this posture. I'm kind of wanting to do that, so I'm gonna not use the pillows. There. I'm just gonna bring myself all the way onto the floor. Practice this posture with a more neutral spine here. So I'm getting kind of the light hip opener. By the way, you can put props underneath your knees if one of your knees are achy, or maybe both of them are. And then we'll spend a few moments here, a few minutes here in reclined. Find your version of reclined butterfly pose here. So it's interesting that there's a red supergiant in the constellation Scorpio in the summertime, the star Antares. And it's interesting that there's a red supergiant Betelgeuse in the constellation Orion, which is a winter constellation in the northern hemisphere. It's in the southern hemisphere, it's reversed. There's a classic Greek story that explains some of the origins or the reasons of why Scorpio is where it's at and why Orion is where it's at. So the story starts out with Orion being this great hunter. So in classic mythology, in classic Greek mythology, Orion was the greatest hunter in the universe. And Orion was the kind of character that knew that he was the greatest hunter in the universe. In fact, he finally began to brag that he was so good at hunting that he was going to undertake the task of killing every single living creature on the planet. Well, the Greek god Gaia, who is the goddess of Mother Earth, she took exception to this boasting of Orion, so she thought she would teach him a lesson. So she sent a very humble, very small creature, the Scorpion, to go and sting Orion. So indeed, that's what happened, is this very small, this very tiny, this very humble creature, the Scorpion, came up to Orion, stung him on the foot, and killed him. And then to honor both of them, they were actually placed into the night sky. Orion in the winter sky, Scorpio opposite of him, so they couldn't fight, but that they were both honored. So you never see Scorpio and Orion together in the sky. They're always opposite each other. And this is so that they can get along in the celestial sphere. So just about 3 more breaths here. And then slowly come out. So you can take your knees, maybe take your hands, use your hands to help your knees and your thighs back together here. And then from here, you can do windshield wipers again. Or since that was an externally rotated posture, you can try an internal rotation for a while. Bring your feet wide as they go and then let your knees fall inward, just to create a natural counter to the external rotation here. I'm not very well internally rotated, so my knees actually don't quite touch when I do this, but maybe it's more natural for you to do this posture. In fact, this can be a substitute for Reclined Butterfly Pose if you don't like the external rotation here. When you're ready, roll over to one side. Bring yourself up. And then from here, we'll make our way back down for one final twist before we move into our Shavasana pose. So from here, find your way onto your back. Bend your knees, give your knees a hug, and then place your right foot down onto the floor. Hug your left knee in. From here, lengthen the right leg along the floor. Grab your left knee with your right hand. Right arm comes out into an outrigger position, so a T or cactus arm position. And then sweep the left knee over to the right as far as it goes. So you're stacking the left hip on top of the right. We're creating a twist in the spine. If this left shoulder lifts up, allow the left shoulder to drift back towards the floor so that you are in a spinal twist. And this is just an integration pose. So we're just here for about 3 breaths or so. Allow yourself to soften, or you can deepen by kind of pulling on that left knee down towards the ground. And then bring that left knee back up. Bend both knees again. Maybe give them a hug. This time, put the left foot on the floor. Bring the right knee in, and then extend the left leg out long here. Take the right knee in the left hand and extend the right arm out to the right, and then lower the right knee over to the left, just as far as it goes. Might make it to the floor, maybe it just floats here. And then the right shoulder is trying to ooze back towards the ground here. You can keep your head neutral here, or you can turn away and gaze down that arm. Maybe one more breath here. And then inhale, bring yourself back up to center. A little bit of final moves before we move into Shavasana. I'm going to recommend reclined 5-pointed star pose for Shavasana here. So if there's any final movements or postures you'd like to practice, go ahead and practice those now. And then make your way into your final resting pose here. For me, this will be traditional Shavasana with arms up overhead. This, again, is this final expression of expansion here. So feet are pretty far apart. My feet are about 2.5 feet apart. Arms are extended out here. And then you allow yourself to become one with the floor. Allow yourself to melt and to cool, to sublimate here. One final time in Shavasana. So soften your face. Soften legs, soften arms. Feel the connectedness between your torso and the floor, and then let it soften. Rib cage releases. Eyes are soft. Jaw is released. Remind yourself and give yourself permission to allow yourself to be here right now, with nothing to do, nowhere to go. You're just noticing your breath. Maybe if you're really still and really peaceful, you'll notice your blood circulation. That ultimate of cooling systems. So your blood moves through your body, and then allow the heat of that blood pressure to move through your skin out into the air around you and leave you feeling refreshed and cool. So maybe it would help to visualize yourself lying next to a mountain stream, high up in cool, clear alpine air. There's a slight breeze here. You're lying in cool grass, and you can almost feel the rush of the water next to you in this little stream. You can hear a waterfall falling off a mountainside that makes the stream in the distance. And it's at night. It's at night and the sky is clear. So it's a cool night. It's a cool stream. It's cool ground. The breeze is clean, refreshing air. And as you lie here, you can see above you this brilliant band of stars, the Milky Way. Beside it, you can see this very bright, ruddy orange star, this supergiant, the heart of the Scorpion. Allow its cool light to help bring a sense of peace to you for a few more breaths. And then when you're ready, you can gently begin to move fingers, move toes, move hands, and you can move feet. Maybe make gentle motions with arms and legs. Maybe one final lengthening here. So sweep your arms up overhead, interlace your fingers and point your palms away from your head. And then press your palms away, press your heels away. Go nice and long, kind of wiggle and squirm here a little bit. Grow a little bit longer here. One more breath. And then you can go ahead and release. Gently bend your knees. Roll over to one side. When you get there, stay there long enough to give yourself a big thank you for your practice, but also a big thank you for you, your unique manifestation in the universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're feeling ready, gently bring yourself up to a comfortable seat. Take a while to get rooted. Find your center one last time. Bring your hands together in front of your heart. I'll end practice with an Om. You can join in, or you can just listen to my voice. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.